In this episode, we discuss the early days of MMA, personal growth, being a good person, the mindset of the martial artist, and coming back from a loss or major setback. I really think you're going to enjoy today's episode. And if you enjoyed the show, please leave us a review on your podcast platform of choice. And of course, please check out the book that started it all, Renaissance Wisdom: How to Flourish in the Modern Day. Thank you and enjoy the show. Today's show is brought to you by Icepod, finally an affordable, portable, and effective way to get the benefits of cold water immersion in the comfort of your own home. I opted for the Pro Bundle, which includes the Icepod, a water circulating pump, a special insulated lid, and a thermometer to check the temp of your water. Even in Georgia, the Icepod keeps my water between 60 and 70 degrees, and when I load it up with a 36-pack of water bottles that I use and refreeze after each session, I can easily get it around 50 degrees for the perfect cold water immersion experience. Despite being light and portable, the Icepod is super durable, and it's the perfect solution for anyone who wants to experience the benefits of cold water immersion without spending thousands of dollars for a home water chiller or trying to DIY your own. Cold immersion can help with recovery and muscle soreness, raise dopamine levels, help you wake up and be more alert, help you to burn more calories, mobilize brown fat, and more. Visit podcompany.com and use my special promo code SHANE50107 for $10 off your order, and each sale helps to support the show as well. Stay cool out there, people. Are you looking for the perfect high-protein snack that isn't loaded with stuff like MSG, nitrates, and sugar? Carnivore Snacks is the perfect high-protein snack made from quality grass-fed beef and salt. That's it. Each bag uses 1 pound of high-quality beef, lamb, pork, or chicken, salt, and nothing else. Aside from being easy, healthy, and convenient, they also taste great. These snacks are not just another jerky. They are way better. Give a bag a try, and I know you'll keep coming back. Check out Carnivore Snacks, spelled with an X.com, and enter coupon code SHANE05137 for 15% off your order, and each sale will help support the Renaissance Wisdom podcast as well. Welcome to the Renaissance Wisdom podcast, where ancient and modern wisdom come together to create a better way of living. I'm your host, Shane Sorensen, and each week we speak with successful people from a plethora of disciplines in search of wisdom from their own lives. Your own personal renaissance begins today. Let wisdom be your guide. Hey everybody, welcome to the Renaissance Podcast. I'm here with today's guest, Dan Moret. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, man. Appreciate being here.
Appreciate you coming on. I'm always very excited to talk to guys in the fight game, especially someone like yourself. I know you're fighting at a quite a high level, so I'm interested to pick your brain about the mental aspects and the training a little bit here. Why don't you go ahead and just introduce yourself? Tell the listeners a little bit about you and your background.
Dan Moret. I'm originally from Minnesota, now training out of Phoenix, Arizona. Grew up wrestling was kind of my first martial art, I guess, when I was in the 5th grade, started doing that. Fell in love with it. And then after high school, that's kind of when I got into more doing martial arts. I was working in the summertime with a buddy of mine who was on the wrestling team. His dad had a construction company. I was working with them. Kind of saw some fights we were down in Iowa, and of course, like most guys who had a couple of beers and are watching the fights, I was like, man, I think I could take these guys. And sure enough, they were like, well, you should get in there. And as soon as I did it, I did 6 weeks later, they had fights again down there. I went in there. I was like, man, I think I'm gonna do this. Got into it and just fell in love with it. The same reasons why I fell in love with wrestling is just a one-on-one competition was a different sort of thing than team sports and stuff, which are also great. But that one-on-one aspect of it and getting into fights, it was a whole different thing. It was just like the purest way I could kind of test myself. I just wanted competition. It wasn't like I was super into violence or I wanted to just fight. It was like, man, I just wanted to test myself and to have competition. And that was the best form that I could find was, martial arts. So that was kind of the start of my journey, was just down there kind of running, getting in these random fights that they had down in Iowa, which were unsanctioned at the time. They didn't have a commission or anything like that. So, we literally would go to the bar, and it was the guy who had a cage, and then the owner of the bar would kind of come in the back, and what you stepped on the scale at didn't really matter. We would walk in there, and they would just kind of point and go, I think you versus you, and you versus you. And, so you're kind of looking at this guy, well, how much does that guy weigh? And how many times has he done this? And you don't really know. It was just kind of how it was. But I found success in it early, and I just fell in love with it. And a short time after that, I found out there's actually people in my hometown doing it. There was other people training, which I had no idea. I fought 5 times, just kind of doing it by myself. I was a boxing fan when I was real young and had a heavy bag in my dad's basement, and just started training on my own. I wrestled, like I said, I wrestled since I was young, and I was a boxing fan. So I just basically hit the punching bag and the bench press, and that was my training for the first 5 fights I had. Thankfully found success doing it, and then found some guys that were doing it in my hometown, and that it was like a legit thing. And it kind of took off from there. I had my first fight, sanctioned one in Minnesota in front of my hometown, which they said was like, well, we're going to get you an amateur fight. We'll do these. And I said, well, what's amateur fights? I already was fighting. We didn't know there was any difference between professional and amateur fights, so technically I probably should have been professional from the start, but got in the amateur fights, and I just loved it. We had such a camaraderie there that I was missing since I had gotten out of wrestling. You're so close in team sports, and such a great thing for young people to do, to build themselves and to build that camaraderie and to go through hard things, and especially something like wrestling. I tell that to my brother. So he's got a young son. I say, this is the hardest thing the kid will have to do. He's got a good life other than that. He's a good middle-class family, a nice place to live. And I was like, but this is one thing he has to do that's hard. And it's seeking that, and it was tough, and you build real camaraderie with that. I was closer with guys on my wrestling team than I was anywhere else. And I found that again with martial arts and the training with that, because it was, kind of some outcast guys who were doing this, at the time was not a big thing. I mean, this was 2007. So it wasn't like it was underground or tiny yet, but it wasn't what it is now. The UFC was not a super popular thing, and it wasn't a sport that people looked at as a legitimate sport. As soon as my family found out I was doing this, they said, you doing what? You're going to fight in a cage? Like, what are you thinking? What are you talking about? And they wouldn't go. They were, I don't think my mom came to a fight until I was 8-0. And she was like, oh man, he's actually kind of good at this, and he's serious about it. I guess like I got to go and watch, as much as she didn't want to, and they supported me fully. And, they thought it was crazy and it was a terrible idea, but I was very fortunate to have a family that was super supportive in it and said, hey, if this is what you really want to do, then you better do it, and you better, put everything into it. Little did I know it would turn into what it is now, to look back and think about that as a young kid who was 20 years old doing it, where I shouldn't even been in that bar in the first place, and then found it. And then to press to a career of, over 35 fights, and having been able to compete in the UFC and currently in Bellator, and, having fought and coached and cornered guys all around the world, and everything it's given me, I had no idea that was what it would become. It wasn't like now when kids grow up and they think about that, that's their goal, and they have that in mind the whole time. It was just something I found, and I fell in love with. Like, man, this is a different kind of competition. It feels so real. There's so much on the line, and the great thing about it to me is that there's so much to gain from it, because it's as pure as it gets, right? There's no balls or yard lines or this many points for that or this. It goes, it's one man versus another man, relatively the same size, and we're just going to go in there and figure it out. You can train and prepare however you want to do it, and however you think is most valuable for you, and I'm going to do what I'm going to do, and we're just going to go in there and figure it out. And there's something about that that's so pure that I love. So I kind of fell in love with it, and I fell in love with coaching it and doing that just as much as fighting and competing in it. As soon as I started doing it, because we had a small team back in my hometown of Mankato, Minnesota, where we had a guy who owned a Taekwondo school, and he just loved MMA and the fights. And he said, hey, listen, I don't know anything about this kind of fighting and real stuff. He goes, I do Taekwondo. I just let you guys train here. He goes, I don't want to coach you. I'm not trying to take any credit for any of this stuff. He goes, you guys can just train here. And so he let a bunch of dudes who were college wrestlers and just tough guys go in there and train and do stuff. And we fortunately had a good kickboxing coach who had moved to town, who was from Minneapolis, Ray White. who moved there. And so we had a high level Muay Thai coach. It was just a bunch of kids, guys who could wrestle. And then we had a high level striking coach. So we had a real good team of just, young guys back when there wasn't teams. We had to drive an hour and a half to find somebody who did jiu-jitsu and to learn that. We
Yeah.
were just a bunch of wrestlers and guys who could, and punch a little bit. And we had a high level coach who had trained at a big level. So we had conditioning kind of far beyond what anybody of the other teams did. So which is why we had early success there. But like I was saying, we kind of had to coach each other because we didn't really have coaching staffs and teams and things like that. It was like, well, there's this guy in town who did kickboxing, and we trained at a taekwondo school, and we're a bunch of wrestlers. So we kind of got to figure all this stuff out and do it on our own. And that was as rewarding as fighting was itself to me. And I fell in love with it, and it'll be the rest of my life now is sharing it and competing in it and coaching it and trying to get the benefits that I've gotten from it in my life and sharing that with as many other people as I can.
Yeah, that's really cool to hear. You talking about the early days and stuff too, because as we were talking about a little bit before, I mean, jiu-jitsu guy. I've had a couple of amateur fights many years ago, but I think like my first fight was maybe like 2008, 2009. So kind of the same time frame. And I remember like my first show that I fought in, my first amateur fight, there was like one of the fighters' opponents didn't show up, and the announcer comes out and he's like, "Do we have any takers?" In the audience, and some dude from the audience just like takes his shirt off, like puts his beer down, and comes in and gets like mauled. And I kind of remember those like super early days, the amateur fights where we were allowed to stomp people's heads, elbow people in the top of the head, up kicks, knees with no shin pads. I mean, and I know you're mentioning like your mom not wanting to come see your fight. I think that's what a lot of people think of when they think of MMA, even still, is like they just think it's this like insane barbaric thing. And while there is an element to that, like you said, it's a fight. It's two people going in, trying to knock each other out, trying to submit each other. Thank God, like the sport has been transformed into a sport, not just like this like human cockfighting thing that people kind of used to make it into.
Yeah, it was it sounds like, most of them back around that time, there was a little bit of structure to it, but it was mostly like a tough man competition, but not just boxing. Yeah. And that's like you're saying, most of the time those guys was like, when it was just at some bar, I would think at least half the guys had one or two beers before they got in. They're like, I'm going to have a couple, I'm going to loosen up, and I'm be ready to go. And they're going to fight, and that's at least how I was a young kid from Minnesota, just down there working construction, and stumbled upon these fights. And I was fighting hairy chested farm guys from Iowa, that probably weighed 20, 30 pounds more than me. And I'm like, I don't know how many times this guy's been in fights in his life and doing it. I'm just a kid, I was like, hey, I'm just a wrestler. And I think I'm kind of tough. I just want to give it a try. And a little bit wild, but you're thankful for the experiences of having that, and without trying to sound like an old guy when I'm talking to the team now and the kids, I'm like, you guys have no idea what it was like back then. I was like, it wasn't like you Googled the guy and there was a Tapology and a YouTube and you could watch his fights and see where he went and scope his face and all this stuff. I was like, no, you showed up and you just fought whoever they said. And half the time, if they gave you an opponent beforehand, it would switch the day of. That was like the first one I had in my hometown after I had 5 fights. I was just fighting in unsanctioned fights. And then they're like, well, you're good at this. We should have you do one of these amateur fights. And I was like, an amateur fight? I don't know. What's that? What do you mean amateur? And they're like, yeah, well, you got to do amateur fights first. And I was like, well, I don't know. I was just doing them already. And so when I went to this first fight, I was supposed to fight one kid. And we pull up and the promoter says, well, hey, listen, the fight's supposed to be at 160 pounds because we're doing it the same day weigh-in. So 155 is 160. And they go, he only weighed 148, so he's closer to this other guy. So you're going to fight this dude instead. And the guy's right in front of you. So it's not like you can say no. You guess you could, but you kind of look at each other and you go, all right, guess I'm fighting this guy. What's he like? Well, I don't know. You get one look at him and guess. I don't know. Is he going to wrestle? Is he going to strike? What's his deal? Who knows?
You're like, what does his ears look like? Does he have cauliflower ear? Is he a grappler?
Yeah.
Is he like...
Well, unfortunately for me, the kid I was supposed to fight, again, weighing 12 pounds less than me, was a skinny little guy who was like a wrestler but didn't look like much. This kid who I fought, I ended up having, this was my first sanctioned fight. I fought him twice. The second time being for the Minnesota amateur title, because he was a big, tough wrestler from Wisconsin. And I mean, he had a neck
Mm.
as wide as his ears, and he was built like this. And I was a skinny little kid at the time, and this kid's big and jacked. And I was like, man, oh man, because it's interesting. They have the local paper was there. You know, they're like covering these fights. Said, man, when this event's going on, we got to be there. So they took a picture of me getting my hand raised after the fight, but they got like a whole description of the walkout. And they're like, he stopped halfway to the cage to dance to the crowd and cheer and hype up the crowd and do this and that. And it's hilarious because I told people, go, I stopped halfway because I was fucking scared. I
Yeah.
was like, oh my God. I was like, look at that guy. He's under the lights and he's got pecs and he's got traps. And I was like, holy cow. Like, I'm going to, oh man. And everybody I know is there. So I had to give myself a second, like, you can win. I was like, you can, there's a way you can win. Like, you can figure it out. Like, yeah, he's a tough wrestler. He's a big guy, but it's like, you're going to win. There's a way to win. And then I was like, all right. And then I walked back forward and got in there, you know. So it was kind of cool. You know, first it psyched me out. I'm like, oh man, I thought I was going to be able to smash this little guy. And nope, you're going to fight this big buff dude. And, you know, it's obviously a better showing for me. Cool. I beat him. And even back in the day in Minnesota, was kind of a weird, like we're saying, Wild West kind of deal. They had a commission, but at that time they had an odd rule where a submission was only a 10-8 round and it started over. You had to submit someone twice because there are so many wrestlers up in Minnesota that people were getting, they would shoot in and get guillotined in 10, 20 seconds. And so no one was getting experience. So like, well, how can we get around this? Well, if you tap out, it's
Yeah.
just you start over. And again, they're like, well, they're amateurs, so if you're in a bad spot, you can just tap. We'll call that a 10-8 round, and then you can go again. Thankfully for me, it always worked out in my favor. But I mean, can you imagine if we're in a fight and you tap me
That's
out, you get
weird.
me in a submission, tap me out, I tap,
Yeah.
stop, 10-8 round. In the second round, I hit you with a lucky punch. You fall the wrong way. The ref says, oh, he's out and stops it, maybe even early. And now I win by TKO after you had already beat me. So, you
Yeah.
know, it never happened like that for me. Thankfully, I was able to submit this guy twice in a row and finish the fight. But one of those odd little rules, you know, back in the day when it was kind of wild. You know, it wasn't like this was 1993. This is, you know, 2008, and it was still kind of
Right.
little weird with the rules and how things went.
Yeah, and I know you mentioned the not really having jujitsu around. Like I remember I'm from Indiana and I all I wanted was just to train jujitsu, and it was like there was a brown belt, that was like an hour and a half away, and that was pretty much it. And then, I moved down to Atlanta to train jujitsu full time later on in my life. And it's funny because like I was at Whole Foods one day, and it's like I'm a black belt walking in, and I see a couple other black belts from a couple of the other gyms, and there's one of the black belt instructors. It's like this Whole Foods in Atlanta's got six black belts walking around in it. Just because it happened to be after the lunchtime training crew or whatever. So
Yeah, big difference.
it's
Drive an
definitely,
hour and a half to find a brown belt.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean it's been great to see the evolution, and especially now. I mean, there's kids that are growing up that have been training since they were 6 years old. They could go in and do jujitsu or wrestling at 6 years old and do that for years, and then they get into boxing, and then they get into wrapping it all together into MMA. And you've got these kids that are coming up, these phenoms that are 18, 19 years old, and they've been training for 10 years. The sport has just really been fun to watch the evolution over the time, for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely getting to the point now, catching up to other sports in a bunch of different ways, but that's certainly one of them where got kids are doing MMA since they're kids. Where you play football since you're a kid, so you know how to play football when you get there. It's not like you only threw the ball or you only ran with it at one point. Like no, you played the whole game since you were little. Now guys are doing that, so there's so many more people who, like you say, have a full, well-rounded skill set when they're older. It's not like, oh, he was a good wrestler and now he fights, or this kid was a national Muay Thai champion, now he does MMA. No, these kids are MMA fighters since they're young, and they have a full-rounded skill set and experience. So it's one of the things that makes it tough for guys like me who are getting a little long in the tooth for this game. And now I got to fight somebody
Sure.
who's 12, 14, 16 years younger than me and has a lot of experience already too. So it's not even like I have a huge experience and edge on these guys. Like, no, he's been doing it for 10 years too. He's
Yeah.
got a long time in this as well. So yeah, like you said, it's interesting to see the evolution of the game like that. and the progression of it in many areas, the training and the scientific stuff that goes into it and the different philosophies on that now, it's so much different than it was even when you and I started, compared to even then, think back before that, 1990s, 2000, those kind of times when it was just
Oh yeah.
tough guys in a room and they just beat the crap out of each other forever.
Yeah. So I know you we talked a little bit before before we hit record. I know you were training for a fight. You literally had a fight lined up this weekend that fell through. What else are you working on currently? I know if you want to mention Rogue Methods, I think for some of the listeners in the show, they the way that I got in contact with you was through previous guest Raul. So I know you guys are business partners there. Why don't you just tell us about your training, Rogue Methods, what you got going on?
Yeah, so like I said, I teach a lot of the martial arts stuff outside of just competing myself. So doing just martial arts and some private lessons with that, and especially self defense stuff, and weapons and things with Raul. I was super fortunate to get connected with him pretty early on. It was 5 years or so ago. We both worked for a different company. He was kind of the training director there, and they had a little MMA team, and so I got connected with them. Said, hey, I was looking just to try to get medical kits and stuff. I was like, hey, they got these cool med kits and these different things. I was like, I'd like to do that. Maybe we can work a sponsorship kind of deal or whatever. I'll do some marketing for you guys. And like, hey, we got this little team if you want to come up and train. And that was when I met Raul and those guys, and it's kind of a cool deal. It's like one of those, interesting parts where those guys I go up there and meet these guys, and it's like, man, it's 4, 5, 6 guys. It's a room full of bad dudes. And I'm like, we're going to go roll and we're going to train. It's like, I'm the only one in this room that hasn't killed several people. And,
Yeah.
but it's like, it's a different thing, right? When you get on the mat, it's like, I'm quickly tying these guys up and they're going, what the hell? Like, you good? I was like, well, yeah, I do this this is my whole thing. You did this a little bit in your training back then, like you do it now kind of recreational, but it's like, this wasn't your whole deal. This is my whole deal. And so, kind of coached them. That's where I met, got real close with Raul, because then, he had done jiu-jitsu and done a bunch of training before that. And so he's like, man, I'd really like to do a fight. And then we trained him up for a fight. He's whatever he was, 37, 38, making his debut. And fighting up 3 weight classes above where he should have been probably against a young kid. And he goes out there and just smashes and gets it done. So we've known each other for a long time and trained on that. So, I was very fortunate to get involved with those level of guys and people like that when I started doing the firearms training, because as it ties to martial arts, I equivalated to this. I said, hey, I got to go and learn and take privates from high level black belts right away, and then I also got to go and do all their seminars, and then I was an assistant instructor at their seminars like quickly thereafter. I said, I got in with the best guys from the get-go. These are undercover DEA guys, these are special forces, these are SWAT guys, these are dudes who have done a lot, contractors overseas, undercover cops, all kinds of different stuff. I get to train with these guys who have been in there and really done it, and to do all that stuff. And I applied the same training styles like you do in martial arts. It's like, that's how you get good at it, really any skill, right? Is repetition and just doing it and getting comfortable with it. Mm-hmm. And I was like, man, I'm willing to sit and just do jab, cross over and over and over on a heavy bag, the same way I'm willing to do draw and retention and present like over and over and over and over. And I would just do it at the house. Like, man, these guys are so good and so smooth when we're shooting. And I'm out there like just all I can do to hold it still and get it on there. People who have not shot handguns and firearms, it's way harder than you think it is. Everyone thinks they're going to hit bullseyes all day with hands. It's like, it's tough. And these guys are just so smooth. So I was putting in a huge amount of repetitions in a shorter amount of time, and then training with the highest level guys. So I got pretty proficient at a pretty good pace because of that mentorship I had with them. And that was a huge help for me. And obviously that isn't any aspect of anyone's life. If you can find good mentors and people that are high level instructors and people to be around that inspire you to try to do it and to do it at a high level, is a really big thing. It wasn't like these are casual guys who just shoot every once in a while and have some fun. No, these guys are very, very dedicated to what they're doing there. First with what they're doing in their military and law enforcement careers, and then also with their careers as trainers doing this. And so Raul and I had a real kind of bond, more so than any of the other guys there. A bunch of great dudes in that group, but Raul and I connected right away, and we just took off with it. And then, eventually he wanted to branch off to do his own thing and with Rogue Methods, and I was all in with him. We're good friends to do that. So we train all the time together now. It's awesome. So, we're constantly able to evolve our program and work on stuff because we train it and teach it every weekend. And then he comes into the gym and he's training with myself and a bunch of other high level guys who get to do all this stuff, and they enjoy it and they think it's awesome. And to get to try these kind of things with different bodies and different people, one in the classes with just normal civilians or law enforcement or DEA or whoever else we're working with, but then also with like high level fighters, where it's an interesting thing to involve the training weapons and the firearm stuff and say, give it to somebody who's ranked in the top 10 at middleweight in the UFC and say, hey, keep this gun pointed at me. I'm going to just try to not let you point it at me as we're going for it. Okay, you're going to draw and I'm going to get a hold of it. Try your best. And it's like, obviously that's a tough guy. He's top 10 in the world and a big dude. And, now you get to train with these kind of people. So our level of training, I think has, exponentially gotten better so fast because of like the resources we have and the teamwork that we have put together into it, just because we're such good friends and we're, we complement each other well. He's such a cool dude. You got to talk with him and meet him. Such an interesting guy. Not just a good friend and training partner, but like a mentor to me too. And in the firearm stuff and in business and just in life, a great dude. He's got a lot of good thoughts on how to be a good person, how to better yourself, and what to do, kind of setting goals and to try to live a purposeful life. And I think we've all had different journeys to get to that point. Some people are on that path real early. His went this way and that way, and he did a bunch of cool stuff. And mine was all over the place, and I found martial arts, and we've kind of met here now in Arizona, and it's become a great bond. So yeah, the Rogue Methods thing is awesome. That's I spend a lot of time doing that when I can, and it's great obviously working with somebody who understands it, where I get to train and go with him and do those kind of things around my schedule of fighting. And so sometimes it's like, I was supposed to fight this weekend. I was planning on being in Minnesota today, cutting weight, and then this interview would have been in my dad's the gym I have in my dad's house, in his basement there, and I would have been ready for fights. Like now this weekend we're training structured defense here in Phoenix, and that's just, it's one of those things you take from martial arts is like, hey, things aren't always going to go to plan. Sometimes hard stuff happens and things like that. It's like, okay, so I didn't get a fight. I missed out on getting a win. I missed out on getting to perform in front of my home state crowd again, which is probably not going to happen for me fighting with Bellator now. It's like they don't fight in Minnesota, so tough for me to get there. So I had an opportunity that, and all those things fall through. And it's like, all right, well, what am I going to do? Sit and pout and, go on a bender for a week then? It's like, no. Yeah. I went and, my my bender was, I went to the pizza joint down the street from me. I ordered 2 larges. I ate half each of one of them, boxed the rest of it up, went home, went for a walk, went to sleep, went to train the next day. And I was like, well, I just had pizza for 2 days in a row. Still trained every single day. I'm back, again today. And then, this weekend we'll get after it and do some training there and do the structured defense, go in and spar tomorrow and give my guys, my teammates, the looks they need. So it's just right back into training and doing it. What are you going to do? You just, these things happen in martial arts and in life. Like, hey man, I had this plan and this thing happened, go like a whole, layout of what was going to be, and it doesn't. So, okay, what next? You keep moving forward and you do what you can. And that's that.
Yeah, and something that you touched on like multiple times in there too is the mindset, right? And how crucial it is. Like, you were talking about the fact that you were kind of able to develop maybe a quicker than usual proficiency with like some of the shooting and some of the weapons handling that you're doing because of your mindset, right? Because you're used to it. You're used to wrestling, you're used to, learning boxing. I think when you do a martial art, you kind of develop this mindset of like, you've been humbled enough times because you've had your ass beat. You've been fucked up by somebody. You thought you were really good at so and so, and somebody kicked your ass. And it's like, I think for a lot of martial arts guys, and women too, whatever. But you get into this like mindset of, okay, I just got my ass beat or something bad just happened, and then you like hit the drawing board. It's like that's where the fun stuff really happens. Sometimes is you get humbled a little bit or something doesn't go your way, and then you're like, all right, back to the drawing board. Let's make a plan. How I'm going to attack this. How am I going to get better? And I think that's obviously a huge part in just being successful in anything in life, right? Is you kind of always have a choice of, do I want to be the victim? Do I want to be like, oh, my fight backed out and go on a bender, or do you say, you know what, I'm kind of bummed out. Let me eat pizza for a couple of days, and then you're like, all right, time to get back on the grind, right? I'm in fight shape. Let's get ready for the next one.
Yeah,
So
and it's the mindset of that is like you said, I'll eat pizza for the Tuesdays, like, but I still got to train and do all the other stuff, right? I'm not going to let that go from that far off, and you just have to
yeah,
take. I think you're saying martial arts gives you that drive and that willingness to think, I just have to be good at problem solving. I don't care what the problem is. Like, I just want this desire to be able to like fix tasks and improve things. That's all I want to do is always just like constantly improving, get better at stuff. I never am like, oh man, I got killed today in sparring. I lost all my rounds and this had like, oh, it's like, man, why did that happen? And I'll watch it back and look and go, oh man, I got taken down because I overextended on this punch and I was in a bad position on the fence. And then he got to here and that's why that happened. And man, that cost me 3 minutes on the ground because he's a really good guy on top and he controlled me. And this is why those things happen. And because I got control for those 3 minutes there, I got tired. So then the next round I wasn't as good. Like, oh, okay. I start to see why things happen that way, right? And you build that like framework in your head of like, okay, this is why these things happened. And so if I fix this one and this one and this one, I might not even have to worry about these other things because we might not even get there. All right, how can I do that? And you just apply that to other parts of your life. Like, oh man, I'm short on my bills this month. Why is that happening? Like, okay, well, man, I missed this opportunity to make some money in this one, and then oh, I also overspent here and here and here. Okay, well, if I just redo that, all right, and allocate some, and you just get good at problem solving, and that's what martial arts is, and that's what's great about training and doing is like, Joe Rogan's famous quoting is like, it's high level problem solving with dire consequences. Like, if
yeah,
you don't figure this out, this guy's gonna kill you until the referee stops it just short of that. Or in practice or trainings, like until you have to tap, where you go,
yeah,
if this would have been for real, he would have strangled me and I would have died. Huh. Okay, there's a serious consequence if I don't figure out why this guy keeps getting behind me and grabbing my neck. And so you want to figure it out, right? So it's just that, it's just life lessons applied from the martial arts mindset of like, hey, all these things are fixable and I get to live another day and try again. And that's one of the biggest things in life too is wanting to learn problems and get better at everything you're doing and all your skills, but also the knowledge of like, hey man, I screwed up today and I had really shitty practices and I didn't go well. It's like, but tomorrow's another day, and I have to learn from it and I have to get better at it, but I'm not going to sit and just beat myself up for it. It's like, hey man, all I can do is just look at it, try to learn from that and go, now I'm going to try my best to do better tomorrow. And sometimes you have really shitty days, and like martial arts has a big help for that, and especially in my life. Is like we're talking about, is like, I had a career where I went through all these fights and all this stuff, and I made it to the UFC, the ultimate goal, right? You get to
yeah,
the big show and you get to do it. And then I went there and I lost 3 fights. I lost and I got out of the UFC. I got cut, and like it crushes your whole dream. Like, man, I was in there, and then I got there. It's like I didn't get it done. Man, I fought Gilbert Burns my first fight, 10 days notice. If guys know who that is, pretty tough ass to fight that guy on 10 days notice.
yeah,
One of the best in the world.
yeah,
And then my second 2 fights, I barely lose decisions where they're this close. And I get cut from the UFC and I'm 32 years old. That's kind of old for, MMA fighters near there. And it was a real kind of point in my life of like, hey, what are you going to do? Where are you going to go from here? Like you can quit and just call it like, hey, look, you did good. You won a bunch of great fights. You fought tons of high level guys. Because I mean, even before that, I think I fought like 10 guys who have been in the UFC or more now. So I fought a ton of high level guys. I won a lot of big fights. I've done a lot of great things. I've had a ton of, success and experience. No shame in getting there and you didn't quite get it done. It's like, hey man, those are the best guys in the world. Like,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. I mean,
to get there and then to lose all that, and then it was like one of those moments where you got to make a decision, right? Like, hey, are we gonna call it? And it's like, because like I said, I love coaching, right? And that was a perfect time. It was like, all right, you had a great run, you did it, like let's get into the coaching role and do this kind of deal, and I had to really take some time and get in some deep thought and go to like a little dark place for a little bit and like really reconcile with yourself. Like, hey man, are you going to be okay with this being your effort and that's where you got and then you cash it in, or is it worth it for you to have to go through the grind again and go through that just treacherous deal of having to fight all these tough guys to get another shot at a big promotion? are you willing to do that? Because I got out of the UFC. I said, I'm going to have to probably win 4 hard fights. I'm going to have to fight 4 tough guys in a row here and win to get back. Like, are you willing to do that? And it took me a little bit to wrestle with that and go, I'm willing to go through it. I'm willing to try. I got enough left in me, and I can do that. And I was like, all right, I made the decision, like, hey, I got to fix some things. I had to look at what my problems were and where my shortfalls were. Hey, you're really good at this. Obviously, you made it this far, but when it really counted, you didn't quite get it done. Where does that happen, and why? And I found those things, was able to start to fix them and work on them, and I won a big fight in Abu Dhabi then. Over there against a UFC veteran, two UFC veterans fighting each other in the main event. Big fight. I got a knockout win over there. And then, obviously with the COVID situation, everything kind of got crazy and was weird there with fights falling through. No fights, obviously, for a while, and then things falling through. And lo and behold, I'm training hard and after it, and I'm still just grinding. Like, I'm going to have to win these fights to get there. And I think because you're in that mindset and you're always training and you're willing to put in that extra work, I was ready to go when a fight got offered to me on a shorter notice. Hey, are you willing to step in again the same way I got into the UFC, fighting Gilbert Burns on 10 days notice? On 10 days notice, are you willing to fight number 3 ranked Goichi Yamaguchi in Bellator, the 3rd ranked guy at lightweight? And can you make the weight? Yes. And I'm willing to go. And because I was willing to put in that work, and I put a reasonable goal out there, like, I'm gonna have to win 4 fights. Turns out I only have to win one good one, and be ready to go. And I got an opportunity there, and got a huge win and beat a number 3 ranked guy in the company, and was able to get a big contract and fight for a world class promotion again.
Yeah, I mean it's you're kind of like knocking right back on the door, as far as the getting back into the UFC goes, right? I mean Bellator's obviously, I guess Bellator and maybe arguably like one or probably the two biggest promotions out there aside from the UFC. I mean, I know that you're coming off of like a couple of recent losses. What are you doing differently, or what did you kind of learn from those two that's making you come back and you're feeling ready, you're feeling stronger? What did you learn from those two?
Well, those 2 fights, man, it was a lot of getting off the game plan. I went out there, and because
Mm-hmm.
I got into this little mindset of just going out there and being super aggressive, which is great, and fans love it, and it's a big part of fighting. Um, that first fight, that was what was winning me the fight. I was kicking that dude from pillar to post and whooping him and smashing him. Good on him for being tough enough to hang in there, and then he pulls it off at the end. The second fight was just a slugfest and a barn burner from the beginning. And we just went at it, and I chucked. It was like, I did not wrestle like I should have. I didn't, control position and win rounds. Got a little bit out of like the fighting, the martial arts side of it, and just went in there to fight. I was like, I'm just gonna hurt these dudes, and that's it. Like, I think I can knock these guys out, and I have the ability to do that and get it. But it's like, hey man, you're a black belt in jiu-jitsu, and you wrestled since you were a kid, and you can control position, and you're a tactical good fighter. That was kind of always what got me there, was tactics and being having a fight IQ. And I got off of the game plan, literally for those 2 fights. And it's one of those things where, that's how things go sometimes in life. It's like, man, even with all the experience I have now, more than 35 fights, I've been doing this for almost 15 years now. It's like, hey, and even then still, it's like, you get off the game plan because you start landing some bombs, or you get hit with a couple, and it's like, all right, cool, we're just going to do this then. And that machismo takes over a little bit, and that'll happen, but you have to be able to control that and get there. So that's what we've, been focusing on and really trying to get back to. And myself is like, yeah, there's going to be a time and a place when you got to just chuck. We're going to bite down, and we're going to throw hammers, and we're going to see what happens. But also be tactically and be smart, and know how to control yourself, and when to push the gas and when to control, when to just do certain things to win rounds and win fights, instead of just going out there and trying to kill somebody every time. You know, it's it's always an evolution of the game, and especially again, I'm not the youngest guy where it's like, hey, you kind of gotta figure out how to just win these fights at the end. It's like, they'll pay you, and they love that you just go in there and you put on a show. Because I put nothing but action for Bellator. It's been 3 fights of just getting it, and they love me for it, which is great. You know, I love Bellator. They pay me good and they take care of me, and then I love fighting for them. Um, but hey, you got to go out there and win too. You know, so that's kind of what
Yeah.
we've been working on and focused on. And I was really excited to kind of show it on Saturday, but again, it doesn't happen. So we stay ready, and hopefully we get to show that kind of stuff here coming up. They got Chicago next month, and then I think Sioux Falls coming up here in August with Bellator. I haven't got that confirmed yet, but you know those are both back up close to my home state of Minnesota. So hopefully we get one of those ones, if not something else before.
Yeah, the I always go back to like the mental side, right? I mean, obviously there's so much physical uh component to MMA or to martial arts. Like you're pushing your body, or you're breaking down, you got inflammation, you got injuries, you got you got to get your diet on point. You have all these things, and sleep and recovery, but you can do everything right, and it one little thought that pops into your head into a fight can change the whole outcome of an event. Going off of the game plan a little bit, or something as small as just deciding, all right, like I'm gonna go out and just go for the knockout this round, and then you get gassed out, and then all of a sudden the whole dynamic of the fight changes. So uh, for anyone out there that definitely has never done like a martial art, I always recommend that. Just go do some jujitsu, go do some. I know it's a lot harder to get into wrestling when you're an adult. It's harder to access, but go do a boxing class. Like you just learn so much about yourself, and it's less about sometimes the person that you're fighting and so much more about how you respond to that pressure.
Yeah, well, and like you said,
um,
it's a lot more mental than you would think, and the connection between the physical and mental part. That's a huge thing for people to just for learning and growth in life and things too, is like coordinating those things. It's not as if your body and your mind are two separate deals. It's all one unit. Um, and a
right.
lot of that it becomes in jiu-jitsu because at a certain point, and even in these fights, right, where it was like that might have worked earlier on, or if I was fighting lesser competition. If I was not fighting world-class guys and I just go in there and just start bombing on somebody, tomorrow we're sparring. If I go into sparring tomorrow and I get one of the younger guys or less experienced people and I just start chucking on them, that'll probably be a decent tactic and I can win. But once you're doing it at a certain level and people have a certain skill set, it becomes less about just the physical side of it. Everybody's tough. Everybody's got good cardio. Everybody's all these things. Now again, it's a mind game and tactics. And people can try, like you're saying, just doing jujitsu. Go and just train jujitsu, and you realize, like, hey man, there's some really big, strong, tough guys. But if you just can be smart and weather it for 45 seconds ago, all of a sudden this dude starts getting real tired. His big old arms he can't even feel his fingers anymore. His grips are gone and he's not feeling it. And now it's like, oh, okay. And you start to diminish that. It's like you can use your mind to win a lot of things, and that's such a fun game to play. And like you said, it's like they're saying it's human chess. It's high level problem solving, and you get to use your body to do it. It's fun to play games like that and do things with your mind, but when you get to do it with your body, it's like your mind is the thing that's controlling all that and dictating the pace and when are we doing certain things and what positions are we going to be in. It's a great experience. So yeah, I can't recommend doing jiu-jitsu enough.
Like a really good example of it too is I'm thinking back to like the big hyped up like Conor McGregor when he fought Diaz. And is like Connor just went out and fucking knocked everybody out. Like just calls the round he's gonna knock him out. And not that he didn't fight good guys. Like he fought some really tough guys, but he comes out with like, Nate Diaz, just this dude that's just been in the game forever. He's got a like rock solid chin. He just goes out there and he just fights. Like no one can put him out. And it's like he goes out there, he fights Conor McGregor. McGregor really was just dominating him. I mean, he was quicker, he was smarter, and I you kind of like saw the moment where he was expecting the fight to be over, and Diaz is still coming. And it was just that moment. It was like you could almost see where the life came out of him, where he expected so much to win that fight. Like this is the moment that it's over, and then the guy's still coming at you. And even that, coming from a point of being so dominant in a fight, and then just realizing that this guy's still game and standing there looking at you like, still coming at you. Just that itself can psych you out, even if you've been the dominant fighter. So
Yep. Yeah, it was when his physical attributes left him, and then he was like, "Hey, I hit this guy with everything I had. He's still there."
yeah,
And then Diaz started to put it back on him, and he goes, "His physical attributes are not anywhere close to Connor's, but he weathered that storm, stayed in there, and then he hits him with a couple of shots and hits him in the body." And Connor goes, "Oh man, that kind of hurt. I'm a little tired now because I'm so fatigued.
yeah,
Now I'm kind of tired." And then it was mental. It was a big switch. All of a sudden, he was like, "Uh oh," and his whole body language changed. He kind of sunk backwards, like, "Oh man, like I can't I can't knock this guy out, and he's hurting me now." And the whole mentality of the fight switched. Right, it wasn't just physical that it switched. It was like, oh, now all of a sudden you're onto the defense, and then he starts to kind of back away, and Diaz starts to pour it on him, and he says he's kind of like, "Nah, now what's up?" And he goes, "Uh oh." He pushed him to the fence, started beating him up a little, and then Connor shoots and tries to wrestle him, and Connor's not shooting on anybody. That was
right,
all
yeah,
just like mental lapse, and he goes, "I got to get a hold of this guy. Like, I'm going to lose." And he shoots and then gets sprawled on, spun, took his back, and got choked out. If he would have just stayed up, even though he was tired, it wasn't that he just physically broke there. It was like, because he physically broke, he made a terrible mental decision. And he started to shoot
yeah,
against the guy who's a way better grappler than him. And now we're grappling. And it was like, oh, that was a mistake. And that's one of those things, like you're saying, it's like, it's right there. Even at the highest level, the best guy in the world, oh, he got a little tired, and then he made a mental mistake, like, and it cost him. And it cost him everything.
yeah. It's that mind body connection that you're talking about too. I think for someone that hasn't really been in the martial arts, you don't realize like how much muscle memory plays in, but it's crazy when you get really exhausted in some rounds, the shit that you do sometimes. Like you do some move that you're like why did I do that? I never do that move, and you get exhausted and your body just starts doing things that it's like it's almost not even trained. It's you do some weird move that you haven't done for 6 years
Mm-hmm.
in the middle of it because you're just exhausted.
Yeah. I'll throw this up
Um,
out of desperation, and you totally lose your position. You're like, why did I do that?
for sure.
Yep.
Something I wanted to ask you too, like I know you talked a little bit about your just the background and how you got into it and coming from wrestling and everything, but what specifically about the fight game do you think it was that drew you in, and what have you learned about yourself and just about life through your travels and your journey in MMA?
It was really what got me to it was just competition. I wanted to continue to compete after wrestling and playing football and lacrosse and stuff in high school. And I was a good wrestler, but I was not a great wrestler. And I didn't wrestle in college, so I was searching for something to do to compete. I didn't think that time in my life was over. And I don't think that should ever really be over in a person's life. I think that's a downfall, like a thing that's happened in society. We sort of stop competing, we stop learning, we stop like doing that. Right? You just fall into like, this is what I do now. And
Yeah,
I didn't want to give that up. I wanted to compete, and when I found martial arts and fighting, it was the most pure form of competition I had ever been involved in, where there wasn't all these other arbitrary rules and referees and judges and points and this different thing. It was just one person versus another, and this is as close as we can match two people up, and you can train and prepare however you'd like, and we're just gonna have to go in there and figure it out. And that was just such an interesting thing to be involved in for me, because to have to problem solve and for the consequences to be so severe, and to be in that kind of a competition where it really mattered and it counted. Like back home in
yeah,
Minnesota, like the place, like we play slow pitch softball, right? My family's huge into it. They love it. It's great and it's so much fun. And they do it at what is high level for slow pitch softball, right? Now it's Division 1, and we're playing the state tournament and all this and that. Doing that, it was like, it was not enough for me. It was not the same. You know what I mean? The game's on the line, and
yeah,
we're down 2 runs, and there's 3 guys on base, and I'm up to bat, and it was like, yeah, if I hit it out, this is awesome, and we win the game. But if I don't, we're sitting here drinking beer still, out of the cooler, like whatever. It's a different thing in martial arts. It was just the competition meant so much more, and that brought something out of me that I knew was in there, and I had in the sports in high school, but it just took it to a different level. And then the camaraderie that I got with my teammates trying this and doing this, and it's that voluntary hard kind of thing. It's like choosing your heart, and to do that and to have a like-minded group of people around to suffer through this kind of thing with, it gave a bond that a lot of my friends that I've had through martial arts are my closest friends, closer than people I've known for much
Mm-hmm.
longer, because we go through way more together, right? And I say this with like it's not in a weird way, but it's like it's a very intimate thing. If we grapple and we're right next to each other and we're breathing on each other and your sweat's falling on my face and I'm trusting you with my life and you're trusting me with yours, that's an intimate thing. Like this is a different experience than, hey, we played a game of pool at the bar together and did whatever. That's not even close to the same deal. So martial arts has just brought me so much as far as that competition and push in my life to try to better myself and continue to better myself. And I think that's one of the biggest things that's given me is a willingness and a knowledge that there should always be improvement. And I've taken that to the other parts of my life as well, where I read more now than I ever did when I was, tasked to read things in school or something. And I try
Yeah.
to, I'm like, I'm trying to learn Spanish. She's like, I'm terrible at it still. And I've been trying to learn it, but it's like, but I'm trying. I took 2 years of Spanish in high school, didn't pay attention for 1 second, and regret it. It was like, now that I'm like, man, I should learn this thing. I should try to learn a new language. I should try to learn an instrument and play some music. I should try to read as many books as I can and get as smart as I can. Hey, what is my health like? I do something that's incredibly dangerous and horrible for your health, right? I fight dangerous men in a cage, but the rest of it is all about like how healthy can I get? I monitor and check every single thing I do. My HRV, my heart rate, what's this? What's my body battery rate? How am I sleeping at night? What's my nutrition like? Am I taking in positive stuff mentally? Am I getting enough sunlight and nature? How's my relationships with my friends? Do I love my family? Like all of these things I think about to try to improve myself, not just for the martial art, but because of it. And it's given me so much of that in life where it's like I I I'll never be bored in my life because I'm super curious. I'll never stop, wanting more and trying to be the best and trying to be as the best version of myself I can be, and not just for me, but for everyone that's around me. It's made me a very selfless person. Like fighting and having accolades and doing these things is great and it's cool. It's nice, right? That all that stuff. Nothing is better for me than when I get to help somebody else. Whether that's cornering one of my good friends I've known since we were an amateur. I coached him since an amateur. He won his first UFC fight. Big deal for me. Whether it's that or whether it's I work with doing private lessons with a female police officer, and now she feels safe on her job because we're working on how to retain her weapon and stay away, and she's getting self defense. He's like, that's so rewarding for me, and to help people and to make their lives better. Martial arts has given that to me, and I can't say enough about what it's done for the other parts of my life.
For sure. That's really well said. Something that I talk about in my book is this kind of like principle of, like on an airplane, you get on and they have these little pamphlets that they put out, and they have the section where you're putting the oxygen mask on, right? The oxygen mask drops down, and it's got like the mom sitting next to the kid,
Mm-hmm.
and it shows the mom putting her own oxygen mask on first before putting it on the kid, which is totally counterintuitive to a parent, right? Or what you would generally think, like, oh, you gotta save your kid. But it's really like when you start working on yourself, when you start developing yourself, when you start becoming a self-actualized and happy and successful individual, and you're constantly growing, it you reach this point where not only are you like inspiring other people, but you just have this passion for learning and improvement. It's like every time you see someone that's struggling with something, or you see someone that is having a hard time with their own oxygen mask, because you put your own on and you focused on your own well-being as a human being, and as an individual, you're able to help someone else. And I think that that's something that's really, really overlooked in today's society. Is you see so many people out there like pointing fingers and talking, like criticizing everyone else and just pointing out everyone's mistakes. And it's like, look at you, you're overweight, you're depressed, you're unhappy. And it's not to say that, your weight or your mental health is like an indicator of your worth as a human being, right? But like if you don't have your own shit together,
Yeah.
Why are we out there just like criticizing and ripping apart everyone else?
Yep. Yeah, it's one of those things. It's like, you clean your own room first. Like, it's not, and
Yeah.
don't. People ask my opinions on political stuff and racial things and red team and blue team and all these issues and wars and not. And I said, I don't. I say, it's not that I don't think about those things. I do. It's worth thinking about. You should have thoughts on stuff like that and don't just negate it. But also focus on yourself and what you can do in your tight circle. That's way more important because those other things are not involved. Whether blue-haired people want to do this or that, or people want to call them whatever. Like, I don't care at all. I'm not worried about that unless it directly involves me. All I can choose to, and again, one of my favorite authors and people to listen to, his audiobook is probably one of my favorite ones. I've listened to a bunch of time, is Jim Rohn, who's a self-help guy and done all that stuff. He was Tony Robbins' mentor. The Ultimate Jim Rohn collection on Audible has probably played 20 times over. And he says the same thing. He talks about put your mask on first. Be the best person you can. He's like, and he said, that's the saying. He said, I changed it, not I'll help you if you help me, is I'll do my best and be my best for you if you'll be your best and do your best for me. Because if I'm my best version of myself, think of what that'll do for me as a parent and as a brother and as a
Yeah.
friend and a coach. If I'm the best version that I can be of myself, that's what's going to benefit the most people. Not me criticizing this thing or having opinions on that or worrying about all these other things. It's like, if everyone was just focused on themselves and their tight knit group and said, how can we be the best we're going to be? How can I be the best person that I'm going to be? As healthy, as happy, as successful, as, ambitious and motivated and driven as I can be, the world would be I think a much better place if we just focused on that instead of criticizing somebody's opinion on this or what they're doing over there or all these different things. Like you're saying, it's like, man, really, the self, the better you can make yourself, the better the world will be.
I I agree 100%. That's I mean that's my message. That's not always what I'm trying to put out there, right? It's like work on you, not that you can ever really complete the journey, right? Because there's always something you can improve on, but I feel like once you can get to a kind of a base level of just being happy with who you are as a human being, right? Of course, like there's always improvements to make, but when you're just content with who you are and you know that you're kind of living the life that you want to be, not necessarily what you're doing, but who you are, that's a really powerful place to be in life, because everything else doesn't matter, right? I mean, at the end of the day, you're trying to win a fight, you're trying to go to work, you're trying to be a good, parent, whatever it is you're trying to do. But when you're just happy with the person that you are and your progress in life, I mean, that's what else can you ask for? No one can take that
Yep.
away from you.
Yep. Yeah. You're always moving in the right direction, and that can only be positive.
For sure. So I wanted to ask you. I've got a couple of questions here. I always ask the guests. The first one is, and I know you mentioned books a couple times and reading. So I wanted to ask you if you have like two book recommendations you had to throw out there for the listeners. What would your two recommendations be?
Um, Man, if I only got to pick two, I two more impactful books. I both listen to and read because I enjoy them that much and try to get, you get a little different things out of each if you listen to it or if you read it, actually both. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Meditations, Marcus Aurelius, is obviously a classic
Yeah,
and just about as filled with wisdom as a book could ever be. Um, and a nice, short, easy one for people is As a Man Thinketh. Um, I've gotten a ton out of that. There's a lot of short, easy ones. That's what I suggest for people, especially people who don't read, who are adults, because I was an adult who didn't read that much.
yeah,
Start with some easy ones. Build a little momentum and get some success. That's a pretty short, easy one. U Squared is an easy one. The Alchemist, that's a short, easy book. Good read. You'll feel good. Get that in,
sure.
So there's a few.
Okay. And what about like do you have any personal heroes or like people that you look up to?
Yeah. You know, an easy one for me, I would say, is my mentor in martial arts really is Greg Nelson, who's my coach in Minnesota, and one of the a real legend in the sport. He's who I have got my black belt under and have been training under for several years. He's coached 4 different UFC champions and several other UFC fighters, Strikeforce, Bellator, all over the world, high level people in kickboxing and everything like that. But he embodies kind of everything. A lot of the stuff we talked about there, like his entire life is just about how good can he get, how much can he share, how many people can he affect in a positive and helpful way. He's such a student of the martial arts and loves it more than anybody I've ever seen. He watches as much as he can and does all this stuff. He's got literally walls full of notebooks that he's taken with drawings in them and pictures and everything too. And he's just such an interesting human, a positive, great guy, and a real badass. The toughest little guy you ever seen.
Yeah.
I go up there to Minnesota and he's 55, 6, I don't know how old, and he gives me hell every time. He'll want to push me and see where I'm at, and go after me. Um, just a great person and a great follow if you're on Instagram and stuff. Greg Nelson MMA. He's full of wisdom and great stuff and humor too. Just a wonderful human. So he's a really a hero of mine and a guy I aspire to be a lot like.
That's awesome, man. I especially somebody that ends up being so close to you. I've had a lot of people answer like their parents and things like that, and I think that's really cool. But it's awesome that you kind of have someone that you know is a mentor to you, and that person is your hero. I think that's really cool because you have this person that you can kind of look up to and model yourself after a little bit too. Um, what about something I'm always interested in is like daily habits, and I've been trying to be a lot more mindful of this myself and trying to get my habits together. But what kind of habits you run through? Obviously, you're training every day, physical aspect, but do you have like a handful of habits you kind of run through every day, try to live by?
Yeah, some real easy ones is just, I mean, the morning routine, obviously, people will talk about a lot. That's a big deal. I think you got to start off on the right foot and get it going. So that's right away for me. It's just waking up, chug water, vitamins are all right there. Everything's laid out. It's right next to me here. I just get that down and go right away. It's like, hey, I'm off to a good start. I got a bunch of water and a bunch of good healthy stuff in me. A big one for
Yeah.
me recently has been movement. I know that's a physical thing, but it's also a mental deal. Again, that mind body connection. Um, and what I've done there a lot is really just downgraded the intensity of what that means. I never was a person who loved running until recently, once I was in the mountains and trail running and doing that stuff. So I do love that, but just movement. I walk so much now, and something I never used to do, and I think it's great for people. Um, Audiobooks, music, whatever you want to do there. And a lot of times just do it with nothing but your silence, the sound of nature. Go for a little walk. I do it after every meal I have. And I probably walk anywhere between 3 and 10 miles a day, every day. Um, and then beyond that is just running and doing that. But that movement is such a big thing, and a daily habit, because that's a daily habit you can keep for your entire life. And if you keep it for your entire life, your life will be longer. So if you walk every day, if you walked 1 mile after you ate each meal, if you can, and like have the time to do that, even if it's just like 10 minutes, or something, but if you can walk like that, if you eat healthy food and walk a mile every day, you'll probably live a long time. So I think that's a pretty easy daily habit for people. It's pretty common sense, but again, Jim Rohn's one of the great things he always said. He goes, "Well, what if I told you if it was as easy as an apple a day?" I was like, "Well, that's easy to do." He said, "Well, but it's also easy not to do. If you don't eat the apple a day, you might not go
Yeah.
for the walk around the block. If you don't go for the walk around the block, you might not buy the book. You might not start your library. So it's just one little thing at a time. It's like that just is like, man, eat some healthy food and go for a walk."
Yeah, it's pretty simple, and the mind body connection is there because man, anybody who's like trying to be a high achiever at anything, like I'll see these guys, they're just like they're trying to like run a business, and they're like, I'm just going to work 18 hours a day and not sleep, and they're eating McDonald's, and is you can do it for a while. I mean, human beings are amazing at the way that we're able to adapt, but there's no way you're going to be able to function at a high level and at your best if you don't even have basic health down.
Yeah.
And it's
Well, and a lot of, if you listen to, there's a lot of high level entrepreneurs, authors, musicians, just people of note that will say, my best thoughts come to me when I'm out on a walk. Just moving
sure,
your body and doing that, you get into this nice little breathing rhythm. Unconsciously, you're not even thinking about it. Your body is in a rhythm. You're breathing, and now you get these little thoughts. And like, that's, I have some of the best thoughts of my entire day. My most, you know, I used to, when I would hike, a lot of times what I do is carry around a little, the tiny little notebook like that with a little pencil, like a golf pencil, and I would literally have things pop into my head, you know. And listen, I'm a cage fighter, and all of a sudden I'd be out for a walk or a little jog, and I would literally have poetry come to me. Kind of, I'm just out for a walk and I'm in nature, and I'll have the most beautiful thought, and I go, I don't know if I heard that somewhere, if that's original for me, but it's like I need to write that down. So I've got this little notebook of like just poems, thoughts, quotes that just came to me because I was just out walking on a mountain and had a beautiful thought. And so that daily walk is a big deal, not just physically, but for mentally. I think it's great.
sure. And it sounds like it's kind of like I guess, an active meditation too, because today's world, I mean, we're always worried about something. We're always stressed about something. We're scroll or doom scrolling on Instagram. We're freaking, we're worried, like we're talking about something, we're watching the news to just put everything down and get into nature for 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and just have nothing but your thoughts and your footsteps walking down a dirt trail. There's something natural about that, something freeing about that, it's so basic, but how many of these moments do we really experience in this modern world most of the time?
Yeah.
A lot of people, I mean, there's people living in New York right now that probably haven't gone for a walk out in nature for many years, right? And they're successful, they're running businesses, but to not be connected to your world, it's kind of an odd thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And obviously, doing out of nature, I think, is the best. But I mean, even if you're downtown in Manhattan, if you can at least get outside and you're at the same time getting that exercise and you're being able to have those thoughts, like you also got the sun shining on your face, the wind's in your hair, like you're getting fresh air and sunshine, all these things. Like, you can't really get more bang for your buck than just going for a walk.
Yeah, that's true. I like it. I might have to start adding a walk in somewhere to my routine. So last thing I always like to ask all the guests, you know, obviously you've lived a lot of life. You've done a lot of cool stuff. Traveling around doing the rogue method stuff. You've been fighting all over the world and some really big events. And you've got a lot of personal projects you're doing. I mean, like learning the language and reading and uh, looking back with everything that you've learned, all the experiences you've gone through. If you could go back in time, speak to a teenage version of yourself, I know maybe 15, 16, 14, whatever it is, and give yourself one piece of advice, what might that piece of advice be?
Probably just tell myself to have patience. I was so frustrated when I was young, not having it figured out. Um, I was lucky to become a professional athlete. I always wanted to play football. That's all I ever wanted to do and thought I was going to do. And as soon as I realized like that wasn't going to happen for me, I didn't I didn't have anything figured out. And I think a lot of people don't have it figured out, and they choose a major in college or whatever, and they fix something. And even in high school or whatever, you got to get this figured out, and you got to know you don't have to have it figured out. Not when you're 15, and not when you're 25, and not when you're 45. It's like you don't have to have it all figured out. Then just have some patience. Like, if you just do your best and try to find it and never get bored and always keep searching, you're gonna find something for yourself. Like I say, I tell people I was lucky. I found it pretty early in my life. I was 20 years old. I found martial arts. I said, this is so cool to me, and it was so rewarding to teach it and to share with other people. I said, I can do this the rest of my life. It's not the only thing I'm going to do. Obviously, if all I ever was known for was being good at violence and fighting and hurting people, I think I came up short as a man. Oh, he was a professional. He fought in the UFC. He did this. If that's all I am, I came up short in my view, because I know that I have potential to be so much more and to give so much more and do that. Um, but if I didn't have the patience to just find that, I guess I'm pretty lucky at about 20 to figure that out. Some people don't find that until they're 50, and all of a sudden you run into some hobby or something. You go, I wish I would have known this when I was however old, and they're great at it, and they become a huge success, and whatever. So I tell that to my young self, because it caused, I was, like I said, lucky to find it when I was young, but it caused me a lot of pain in my life, like thinking I wasn't gonna be something, and I wasn't gonna ever be enough, or be good, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. Everybody had it all figured out, and I didn't. um, and it turns out nobody really has it all figured out. So have a little patience, young Dan. You're gonna do okay. And you'll make some mistakes, and you'll have some things that'll happen, and setbacks and all kinds of stuff. Everybody does, but I think in the end, and obviously pretty early still in my life journey here, but it's like, I think you're on a good trajectory to be a good man. So have some patience with yourself, and stay after it.
Man, I just love, uh, I love hearing from someone, right? Like, again, everything you've done, and how rare it is to be in Bellator, how rare it is to have been in the UFC, to be at the level that you're at, right? And you look back and you say, my greatest accomplishment is, who you are as a man, right? Who you are as a human being. I think that's a beautiful, beautiful mindset to have, right? That it's not about this legacy or the things you've accomplished, but just who you are as a human being. And that's so sorely lacking in this world. I really, I hope that that's a sentiment that we see a lot more of in the world, because it could really use it. I think that people are so concerned with everything external to themselves, and it's like so many people just go through life and they never look in the mirror and ask, like, who am I? Who do I want to be? Am I on the course to be the person that I would like to be? So
Yeah,
I love that, Dan.
it's just it's striving to be your best. I don't think there's any reason not to.
For sure.
It's just a life goal, and push, and if you do that, good things will happen, and I think you'll end up being a happy person for it. I don't think anybody could argue with that. Hey, if I just always do my best, and I just keep moving forward, and do that, if I help as many people as I can, I think things will work out for me.
Yeah. Well, Dan, I think that's a great place to leave off. I really enjoyed speaking with you, hearing a little bit about the old, like, root 'em shoot 'em kind of like UFC days and MMA days, and just hearing about your journey and everything. And definitely would love to stay in touch with you. Is there is there anybody you want to shout out, or anything you'd like to mention? For the listeners to check out if they want to find out more about you.
Yeah, man. Instagram's usually the easiest way to check out or follow things about me. If you're interested in martial arts and stuff, give me a follow there. Greg Nelson MMA. Like I said, that's a great follow if you're into it. Um, if you're looking for self defense, and just some growth as a human and as a person, Rogue Methods and Raul and myself are really trying to help people and better as many people as we can there. And I tell people this, hey, if you have questions or things like that, shoot me a message on Instagram. I try to find it when you're in the hidden ones or whatever, when we're not following each other. If you got questions on things, and you need some help with something, give me a shot, and I'll try to help you and do whatever I can. If you got questions about, hey, where should I train, or what should I do with this or that, I really try to help as many people as I can. So give me a shot on there. Hitman Moret, Moret on there, and give me a shout, and we'll stay in touch, and hopefully I can be in touch with a few of the people as well.
Awesome. Dan, thanks again for coming on. Had a great time speaking with you, and I hope you have a good rest of your evening.
All right, thank you, man.
Yep. Thanks for listening to the Renaissance Wisdom Podcast, and hopefully you learned at least one lesson on today's episode. Our mission here is to uncover practical wisdom to create a better way of living for our audience. If you enjoyed this episode, please help us by leaving the show a review on your podcast platform of choice, and by giving it a share on social media. This really helps us to grow our audience and to continue to add more episodes. If you are interested in learning more, please check out our website at renaissance-wisdom.com, or check out the book that started it all, Renaissance Wisdom: How to Flourish in the Modern Day, now on Amazon. Thank you again, and may wisdom be your guide.